Okay, some hypoglycemia. 3-year-old presents with seizures due to hypoglycemia. She'd been well until yesterday when she started to have acute gastro. She has not eaten well since yesterday morning. Her blood sugar is 35. Which labs need to be drawn to determine if it's due to exogenous administration of insulin? Insulin and C-peptide, insulin only, C-peptide only, insulin and proinsulin, or insulin and ketones? You put your answers in. Very good. So the answer is insulin and C-peptide. Again, in the bottle, it's only insulin. But if it's, being made, you got the pre-pro insulin and the pro-insulin, and then you get insulin. And when you cleave that off, it's that C-peptide, that connecting peptide that connects the alpha and the beta subunits of the insulin. So that's when it's made from the inside. Made from the outside, it's only the vial. And so it only have insulin in it. So very good. So hypoglycemia, depends on the blood, how you got the blood and how old the kid is. So if it's whole blood, the bedside glucose that you're checking, it's going to be a little bit lower because red blood cells will metabolize some of that glucose. So preemies can go down to 20, 25, it's from the serum or in the lab. Then full terms and any other kid, it's 40 and 45. So make sure you know the source of the glucose that you're testing and the age of the child. So this is kind of a busy slide, but when you get hypoglycemia, and everyone just kind of freaks out, okay? And I can understand that. And it is complicated, but most important thing you're trying to differentiate is the presence or absence of acidosis, and in my mind, really the presence or absence of ketones, okay? So if you look like this list is a little bit shorter. I like memorizing the shorter list, right? And everything else is longer. But if you have no acidosis and no ketones, either it's too much insulin or fatty acid oxidation disorder. You can't, break down your fatty acids, okay? All the other ones have normal and elevated ketones, okay? So we'll break this down a little bit and talk about the more common ones that you'll see and the ones I think that you'll potentially see on your boards. So when you see these kids, the most important thing, they're in the ER and this happens, and they're in the ER and they're seizing, and it's very scary when they're seizing and everyone's trying to stop the seizure and get the blood sugar up. But that's great, but you got to get this critical sample, Somebody else should be trying to get blood while somebody else is getting the blood sugar up. Because this critical sample, I always say, don't call it critical for nothing, because if you don't do it, then then they say, we have to send them to endocrine because their blood sugar was low. We have to fast them. We have to bring them in and we let them sit in the observation unit for 12, 24, 36 hours potentially and not feed them. We are not the most popular doctors at that point, okay? And so hopefully it will be, they'll have a low blood sugar and then we can get the sample. But again, the critical sample, and what you're trying to do is trying to figure out that wiring diagram. Where do they fit, okay? So chemistry panel looking for the acidosis, obviously the glucose, the insulin and C-peptide, because Munchausen by proxy, unfortunately, is out there. The cortisol and the growth hormone, making sure their counter-regulatory hormones are working. And the free fatty acids, the beta-hydroxybutyrate and the acetoacetate. Can they use, again, first line is glucose. When you're done with your glucose, you got to start breaking down your ketones. That's the normal pathway of starvation. And so you got to figure out, can they go down that pathway? Are they breaking down their fats appropriately? And these other ones are more inborn errors, which aren't as common. So probably, from here above is the most important. Always want to get ketones, whether that be in the blood or the urine. And that saved tube, we used to call that the digitubes, when I was a resident. Because the next morning, the staff person would come on and they would say, well, did you get this or did you get that? And we would just have serum that was held. And we're like, oh, yeah, we got it. And we'd run to the lab and order it up. So the digitubes, yeah. But again, if we don't get it, we gotta fast them, which is never very fun. So again, things you got to know for hypoglycemia, hyperinsulinemia. And the most common thing is if you're on insulin and you underestimate or how much you ate or you overestimate your insulin requirements, you're going to get a low blood sugar. So that's the most common. But the Munchausen by proxy, again, unfortunately, is out there, and I've seen it a number of times. Munchausen's when you give it yourself. A lot of teenagers, they don't want to go to school. They give themselves too much insulin. Or Munchausen by proxy when somebody else is giving them the insulin. Endogenous insulin in kids is pretty rare. In adults, again, you get insulinomas. In kids, that newborn nursery, when you get that nocidioblastosis or hyperinsulinemia, that's about the only time you're going to see it. Otherwise, you don't see it in kids, any sort of an insulinoma. So again, exogenous, outside the body, in the vial, they're going to have high insulin and low C-peptide, okay? And then endogenous, inside, high insulin, high C-peptide, okay? So again, it's not a set number, but, when you go in, your insulin level is, 300, and your C-peptide is normal, they got it from the vial. So that's probably one of the more important ones you can get.